that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too.
We'd firstly like to express our deepest sympathies and condolences. We're very thankful for being able to share this great bloke with you. So all of us again are here as part of the celebration and the thanks, and also in some way to ease your grief.
There's some of the firemen and deckhands there. Balmain, Woolloomooloo and Piermont, and it's the reason so many seafarers and wharfies of course, and painters and dockers came from Balmain. The harbour was the workplace. You certainly didn't go for money. I went for £7 a month and I left £5 a month of that to my mother, who was a widow. You went to see the world. And when you saw it, my first visit was to Durban, and when you saw how black people were treated and the inequality of man, and unless you had no conscience, it always impacted upon you and made you want to do things to make life easier for them.
He's a very political person, as we know, but his politics were shaped by real events and real people. So when he went to sea, with that enormous intelligence that we know he had, and really fathomless compassion and empathy, he was able to absorb and soak up the great injustices. And of course it shaped his life. And I think a lot of that came out of that Balmain tradition and that working class tradition, but also his strong views about socialism and cooperation and redistribution of wealth and social welfare.
I think he would have been very happy that the service is being held here, down in this area, the Trades Hall. You know, the whole area is full of the union activities and full of Labor politics. I once asked Dad what his greatest asset was, and he told me it was the ability to read the political mood at any one time. And whether that was dealing with ship owners, politicians, judges, and even the membership base. He did give us advice over the years, of course, as any father does, and the ones that resonated with me were: always treat people like family, and always treat people with compassion. Always have concern for the sufferings and misfortune, and always be a little bit mischievous. I have asked Mum what attracted Mum to him the most, and she said it was his kindness to his others.
Pat was a proud Australian, and who loved the Australian culture and believed all Australians should have meaningful work. He loved an underdog. That's why he backed so many slow horses at the races. But also he loved the Seamen's Union and the family environment it created. And the last memory I've got is playing a game of crib with my son and daughter, and him taking great pleasure in beating us, convincingly, and then gloating. He was a good grandfather, good father, and a good husband. And he was telling all his stories to his friends in heaven. Rest in peace.
He was so genuinely interested in everything that related to his sons, their wives and his grandchildren. He celebrated every achievement and milestone that they passed through with genuine love and pride. For a man born in 1928, Pat moved with the times. He was always up on all current affairs and tried to keep up with technology. Mind you, the mobile phone did escape him. Born in a time of financial hardship in a large family, he never judged others by their income or begrudged anyone's success. He was very accepting of people from all walks of life, nationalities and cultures. He loved travelling and seeing the world and sharing his adventures with Tessie. We were lucky enough to share our lives with a legend, a true legend.
I went to South Africa early in the... I made several visits on ships to South Africa, so I saw myself what was happening, and so did other seamen. Apartheid became a war cry, really, and we continually had it across the front page of our journal was Free Nelson Mandela. And the oil embargo was a voluntary boycott. It was effective, and it put more and more pressure upon the government of South Africa. South Africa was like having a boil on your face. But we took part in lancing that boil, and as the South Africans are very proud of the support they got.
Growing up, Pa would tell us a lot of his stories about the places he's been, the people he's met, and things that he and the other union members had done. Often, we didn't understand the significance of his stories and achievements because to us, he was just Pa. I mean, didn't everyone's grandfather meet Nelson Mandela and attend international conferences? Pa taught me that the ability to create change is within all of us. We just need to have the courage to do what is right. And for me, that is one of the most valuable lessons that I learned from him. As he wrote in my 16th birthday card, be happy, be proud, and be compassionate.
Many of you know my grandfather as a variety of things: a seaman, a union leader, a world traveller, a success story, but there's only a handful of people that know him as a grandparent, or Pa, as I knew him. And this is the experience I wish to share today. As a grandparent, they don't come much better than Pa for 3 reasons. The first is that no matter which family event it was, he could be consistently counted on to bring the chips, donuts, cream buns, or any other food that made a mockery of Mum's vision for a healthy eating and a healthy lifestyle. Not to mention, at the end of all that, he was known to slip $20 our way, which when we were younger was a godsend. But most importantly, Pa was a shining illustration of the great personal side of humanity. He was a man of generosity and compassion who simply wanted to help others and enjoyed doing so. He taught me the importance of humility and respect for everyone. He took it as his duty to stand up for others, and he did so with a chuckle and a cheeky grin, although he never wanted a fuss made over himself.
I'm proud about the security that the retirement fund gave to families, and I've heard families expressing that gave certainty to people in retirement as well as when they're working. And that's probably the thing that seafarers, seamen appreciate most of it all. I think the union school that we had down at St George's Basin was just like ships, and we supplied the education and they supplied the questions.
I've known Pat Geraghty for more than 50 years. We first met when I was chief mate and his boss, I think, of the oil tanker Caltex Liverpool. He had large hands and a firm handshake. I thought at the time he was brash but confident. Now this ship, as many of you well know, was a precursor to his assuming the position of Assistant Federal Secretary of the Seamen's Union. He's a good bosun on a very hard-working and very old and tired vessel. There was no time for them and us or awards. Now, why would we be friends? He did love that ship and all its crew, and so did I. Coming ashore, we went our own way, so to speak, with him on the union side and me on the ship owners. These were the golden 60s and 70s and 80s, during which time Australian flag shipping was at its best. There were new trades, new tonnage and a drive to become more efficient. By this time, I was General Manager of the Shipping Division of Howard Smith and the President of the Shipowners Association. And PG was a union leader with worldwide influence. There are always issues, but may I say once agreed his word was his bond. He swallowed the anchor carrying the respect of Prime Ministers, industry leaders, and more important to him, the many seafarers he represented. Our last handshake less than 2 weeks ago was as strong as our first more than 50. He was my mate.
Seamen were involved with the union. They loved their union. We had monthly stop work meetings on the last Tuesday of every month where all these things were discussed. The roster system where you got dignity instead of being lined up with 100 people for a job. We obtained an aggregate wage that took the place of wages and overtime. It gave regular income to seamen and their families.
Long before there was horse whisperers or Senate whisperers, there was the industrial whisperer. And nobody was better at it than Pat Geraghty. I remember a guy who was going to put a catamaran into Bass Strait, a sea cat, and he said to me, "I'll tell you what, Dolman, it'll be over my dead body before there'll be a Seaman's Union member on these ferries." I said to him, "You better be careful because the Bass Strait is riddled with the bones of skeletons who made such statements in the past, and I intend to bring my National Secretary in to have a talk to you about it." And Pat just weaved his charm all over this guy, worked him up and down, in and out, and before the end of the day, we had in principle enterprise agreement with Mannings, and I was doing the first inspection voyage of it from Bass Strait into Melbourne. He knocked them over in no time. Pat was a great moral compass for me in my development, and I looked to him and Taffy and John Benson and my Seaman's Union family who raised me to be what I am today. I love my mate, and I just wish him a fair wind and a following sea. Thank you very much.
One of the things I would like to have in my memory folio is our support for the Olympic movement. When the Fraser government attempted to boycott the 1980 Olympic Games, not by banning the athletes from travelling, but by browbeating them and attempting to browbeat them and the Olympic Federation into non-participation. We responded to that, and from rank and file seamen, the Federation and the individual teams were sponsored at a tune of $53,000. The standing up to Fraser, who was standing over the Olympic Federation and the attempt on the individual athletes, while simultaneously selling his wool into the pool that went to Russia, and Anthony selling his wheat into the wheat that went to Russia, and maintaining their export of minerals. Hypocrisy of the highest order.
I've had many beers with Pat since, trying to recollect which of us approached the other first, whether it was me seeking or Pat offering the financial support of the SUA membership. Meetings of the SUA and other maritime unions were held across Australia to not only raise funds for our team, but importantly, to express solidarity with our athletes as they struggled to overcome the harassment and intimidation from a government that had divided our nation on the boycott. Athletes received death threats and were made to feel like traitors if they did not withdraw. Corporate sponsors withdrew their funds. The pressure was enormous. Pat's support and encouragement was critical for those of us who believed in the rights of our athletes to compete in the 1980 Moscow Olympic Games. We may have appeared like strange bedfellows, but the maritime unions and the Olympic movement share a common goal of world peace. Pat Geraghty taught me not to be backward in standing up to government and which I've enjoyed. The Australian Olympic movement offers our sincere condolences on Pat's passing. He was our dear friend.
I would describe internationalism as part of the working class, assisting each other throughout the world, trade unions in particular. Our, I guess, boycotts in many ways was a response to, in Chile, to the murder of a democratically elected president. Greece, the colonels took command of Greece. The colonels were fascists. And we took action against Greek ships. We objected to our presence in Vietnam. We eventually decided we wouldn't take arms, but we would take all the other things that were necessary for the troops in Vietnam, and did so. And when that ship sailed, it sailed as a peace ship. The Geraghty became the supply ship, and bombs were attempted to be loaded, or were loaded. We held meetings throughout Australia, and by 100 to 1, the seamen voted not to participate.
This is what Bob says, Bob Hawke. I deeply regret that travel aboard to China has precluded me from being with you all this morning in paying tribute to a great man, a great trade unionist, and a fighter for human rights dedicated to doing whatever he could to make the world a better place for all his fellow human beings. Pat was admired and respected across the union movement in Australia and internationally. This was an admiration and respect that I deeply shared. He was more than a remarkably talented colleague. He was a true friend. My sincere condolences go out to Pat's family. You can be comforted by knowing that the world is the better for the wonderful life that he lived.
I'm not falsely modest, I don't think. I'm aware of what I've done, and I'm aware of the changes that I've made. But I'm a leader, and the Seamen's Union are leaders. But you can only lead if people are going to go along with you. And I guess I'm happy that their lives are better, but I'm most happy that they were part of the changes that were made.
What a great generation they were. The seafarers after the Second World War were determined to build a better industry and a better Australia. He began his working life and his union career in Australia at a time when injury at work meant poverty. Getting sick meant going broke. He dedicated his passion and his life to changing that, and he and others did. A leading voice in the Seamen's Union, working with Elliott v Elliott, delivered historic firsts for Australian seafarers. Things now that people take for granted. A guaranteed annual wage, severance pay, long service leave entitlements, essential conditions, never given, always hard fought, always hard won. In every sense, he never sailed under any flag of convenience on any issue. He believed wholeheartedly in the equality of global human rights and also the obligation for us all to uphold human dignity. To seafarers, I promise that if we are elected, we will put the Australian Red Ensign on many more ships than currently exist. May he rest in peace.
A few times there I had a bit of tear in my eye when I was watching, like the speeches and the tributes to him, and I can honestly tell you, mate, it was right what they said. This bloke cared not just about seamen. He cared about not just about Australia. He cared about the world globally.
He said, I'm a fellow seaman the same as you. And that's what Pat was, a seaman the same. That's probably the best way to describe him, that he was a seaman the same as the rest of us. And that was his attitude to us, you know. He was no better, no worse than us.
He was a mentor to myself and a lot of other officials and ex-officials of the union, and this was a great recognition today, I believe, and you know, great memories of a great man.
He was just had that capacity to make you feel comfortable, to express yourself. He'd never discourage you from getting active in any way whatsoever. He was just something special.
And he always thought of other people, you know, and helping other people out, like he did with my son George not long ago when he had cancer. And he's just that type of person, a lovely man.
We all know what we have today is through people such as Pat Geraghty, if not specifically Pat. He was an icon and he'll inspire me to be a better unionist and person.
Pat was a great husband, great father, but he was also a fantastic trade unionist and a father of our union. So I think his family need to be thanked more than anything else.